So over the course of 2.5 years, backing up a little bit, Russ Elevado had a couple of pieces of equipment from a German Austrian company called WSW, which directly translates to Vienna Low Current Plant. And they were a couple of pulse width modulation limiters in the style of Pi compressors that everybody knows from the plug-in models.
Right.
But these guys, WSW, I believe, I don't know if you know anything of the history of Siemens, but Siemens, the way they did it was that they did in-territory distribution deals for all of the different licensing territories in Europe. So if you were Hungarian, you would license the designs and then manufacture them in your own protectorate. And Austria specifically had a licensing deal to where they could build their own stuff as well and brand it thusly. And so they built this series of pieces of equipment under the label Vienna Low Current Plant, which also made like shavers and clocks and like anything that was a low voltage electronic. Like Siemens to this day, for example, still makes doorbells and shit like that. They were just dealing with low current electronics. But I have this theory that these guys were on some real Napoleon shit because everything that they have ever built is so unbelievably overbuilt. It's inexplicable. Like these limiters that Russ had have dual concentric geared clock fucking parts for the knobs that are all hand wired point to point resistances. And they're like 2.5 dB and half dB steps. And this is 1963. Like this is a silicon germanium transistor based thing that has like 7 transformers in the signal path that they're dealing with like that level of precision for. Like they were manufacturing these as basically like the broadcast over modulation limiters for radio stations, from what I'm to understand. And so they also made this series of compact modules, the 811 series, and is what I think the larger manufacturer label is. But the console that I have is 811510 modules series, which are absolutely gorgeous. Germanium silicon transistor based line amps and mic pre's with crazy inductors that WSW made, and like all transformers that they made in the territory. Everything is mil spec point to point wiring with solid core wire that you can trace with your eye. It's like truly unbelievable levels of mania. Like indefensible, you know, like the only reason that I think that anyone would do it was to be like, fuck you, big brother, you know what I mean? So that's my theory about these guys. And so the reason we don't really know shit about them here is because geopolitically, the way that it worked with the licensing territories then is most of this stuff went to the other side of the Iron Curtain. So it went to like Slavic countries, Eastern European countries, Belarus and shit. And all these communist countries had a policy that when they decommissioned old equipment, they would destroy it instead of trying to recapitalize it. Yeah. So as far as I'm aware, there are three WSW consoles that I'm aware of in America. There's mine. There's the one that Bryce Desner and Aaron Desner from the National own that they bought from Maroon Pandian. And then there's one that's owned by a gentleman out here who's a fantastic engineer and mixer called Carlos Castro. But he hasn't restored it. He just has some EQs in a rack that he adores, and he hasn't put the line amps back into service. Wow. So mine particularly, when I got it, it showed up in a rack case. It was factory installed in racks, which is fucking psychotic. And like there were like, you know, 50s red long underwear style like drop down little thingies for the connectors in the back, and you'd like plop open the pajama butt flap and then plug in your Elcos or whatever Twinkles or whatever the fuck. And it was complete as near as I could figure, and it was in very good physical condition, but it was basically sold to me non-op, right? So I bought this thing in rack cases and then had to figure out how to restore it. Was lucky enough to find schematics. My assistant helped me for like 2.5 years. I think it took us to get it all the way back up to spec, and we did a bunch of mods.
Wow. Oh my God.
It was wired for DBM, so we did a bunch of direct out balancing mods and installed like Tab, Funkenwork, U273B output transformers, or not 273B, sorry, U73 output transformers. So they're actually happier at +4 spec now, and So, and then I have a tone lux kind of as the center section for all the stuff, all the signals from the recorder return to that. So, functionally, it's a really huge split console with like everything's patchable direct outs, right? So it makes a lot of sense in a sort of Pro Tools hybrid workflow because everything can just show up in a channel fader, or you can group mix out to it or whatever. And then because it had no housing intrinsically, I needed to figure out what the hell I was going to do just with it physically. And so I was put in touch with a guy called Francois Chambard, who is a true genius level designer and fabricator and just mensch, this fucking guy. I love this dude. And over the course of 2 years, while we were doing all the electronic stuff, Francois is designing this physical thing, and he fabricated it, soup to nuts himself. And it is just a work of art and a beautiful thing to sit behind, and sounds great.
Wow.
WSW, from what I hear, apocryphally, WSW was what Neve stole the design for the 1066 from, the original Konk's, like Konk recorder Kink console or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Kink's Konk recording console. It's hard to say. You know, I'm talking about the like blackface one with the germanium diodes. That there's like a rack of it on Analoger right now that belonged to Michael Bynor, that they won $1 billion for. So yeah, Neve stole from what I hear from the WSW techs and Siemens techs that I know, Neve stole the 2254 design from the U273 series of diode bridge limiters, which are the U73 solid state followers. It's the first solid state compressor ever. It's a diode bridge limiter, and that the inspiration for the sort of feedback implementation or something for the 1066 is stolen from the WSW. So
wow,
yeah,
cutting edge. At the time.
Exactly, yeah. And, you know, I mean, even still, bro, like, I've got mono and stereo channels, and, like, the stereo channels have, like, mid-side on them.
What? No shit. In the 60s?
Yeah, crazy, like, 60s mid-side encoders. And so this desk specifically, I don't know who was using it or where it was commissioned, but, like, this revision of desk was what was in the Vienna States Opera when they were doing all those, like, broadcast concerts through the 60s and 70s and 80s. This was the equipment. There's a great studio in Austria also called Casino Baumgarten that has a crazy version of one of these installed that's worth checking out. They're rare as hen's teeth, and they sound awesome. It's all detented. Like, the faders have ball bearings. It's crazy.
So do you do any mixing on it, or is it just for... Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
It's all hybrid.
Sounds awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. 2.5 years of getting it up to spec. That sounds like quite the journey.
Well, I mean, it took that long because I was still working and trying to make a studio
got other
work
things to do.
and, you know, trying to, you know, meet girls and all that stuff. So, but yeah, a project like this is a crazy thing to undertake, and I think inevitably spirals out of control.
Yeah.
You know?
Insane.
Yeah.
So in terms of like mixing, I know you mentioned you mix in 5.1. Do you have any things that you're thinking about when you're mixing a song of, like, you know, whether it's, you know, stereo bus compression, I don't know, anything that you do consistently that kind of helps you achieve your mix, or things that you're thinking about in order to achieve your mix?
Well, I think I'm kind of unusual in this regard, but I don't do any stereo bus compression at all. I don't do any 2-mix processing if I can avoid it, because
really,
yeah, for me, there's just a practical issue of, like, I want parity from the stems. Like, I want to really actually have one-to-one parity from stems and not have to do the thing that everybody does. We're like, oh, I could just recall it from stems. I'll just put the SSL back in. Like, that still doesn't work. It doesn't work. I don't know. For me, for my process, for the pedagogy that I received and the stuff that I like, I sort of feel like a lot of the times, at least in my own work, I don't know how to get the kind of interplay and, like, specificity that you can get if you're working at the channel and bus level rather than 2-bus level.
Mm-hmm.
I know, like, a lot of people whose work I love, like, smack the shit out of an SSL, but for me, whenever I'm trying to do that for my own stuff, it ends up like that the time constants end up feeling a little monochromatic, and then it feels like what people talk about as glue for what I'm often looking for as a mixer is kind of actually not what I'm looking for. Because that glue is implying the time constant of this 2-bus transient response to the whole mix in a way that, I don't know, just for what I'm looking for isn't usually it.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like if I take the time to at the drum bus level get the time constant sitting right, and then at the bass level get the time constant correct, and then at the every individual part of the guitar or piano and overdubs, then you have this much more organic time domain interplay happening, and you can like, I mean, I'm presupposing the fact that all of your listeners will agree with me that compression in the time domain against the BPM of the song that you're working on is where all good mixing begins and ends. But like you're implying that psychoacoustic layer of groove with compression to all the instruments that you're dealing with in a mix. And so again, like sometimes I want the drums to feel a little bit more laconic, and I want the bass to be like on top of the beat a little bit. And when I'm mixing a group level or an insert level individually in order to achieve that, when I then put that into a two mix thing, it all falls apart. It's like there's
I see what you're saying.
too much peanut butter in the dish now,
You don't have that variety, I guess. Yeah.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's like, another metaphor would just be like if you painted this whole big, beautiful painting and then you took like some gesso and like just did like a fine coat of gesso over all of it that had a pigment,
Right. So you're kind of smearing your dynamics in a
You're
sense.
just implying this whole other perspective on top of this whole other picture.
Right.
So
what happens with mastering? Do you have like a mastering engineer or several that you work with, or you
definitely,
and you let them kind of do that to it though?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. And don't get me wrong, like the combinatory effect of layers of compression also is the sound of modern music, right? Like the fact that like the multiplicative effect of increasing layers of ratio stacking is multiplicative, not linear.
Multiplied, not additive. Yeah,
is again the sound of modern music, right? Like we're hearing not only gain structuring, but like dynamic gain structuring and all that shit, like smacky, and that's what makes Skrillex or whatever. Insert whomever is more relevant here, So, I'm definitely not afraid of smacking it, but I don't know. I sort of feel like, again, the tools that a mastering engineer are going to be using to do that interact with the pre-existing time domain things in a way that, like, that multiplicative effect feels like MSG or umami. Like it feels like it makes it what it is already more rather than making it into something else.
Because it's limiting more than compressing. It's like not a slow compression
thing. 100%. Yeah, but even still, like, I don't know, if you're an SSL, the only difference between a limiter and a compressor is ratio amount, right? So like an SSL.
It's, I mean, I guess you set the speed, the SSL has only so many, attack and release varieties that you can use with it, right?
Right. Exactly.
And you can really dial in a limiter with that kind of stuff.
Well, but again, an SSL is a limiter, right? It's just the limitations of that box in terms of the time domain constants that are present. Really the only difference between a limiter and a compressor is that I think it's 10-1 is a limiter.
I think I heard 21, but yeah, could be 10-1. Yeah, sure.
But anyway, to the point, like if you're using like the kind of like mastering, focusing, limiting tools, those generally tend to be very fast on both sides. And then they're also going to have their own like secret sauce for the slow stuff that feels great. So I don't know, maybe it's just my own inexperience, or this is me happily saying that this is me getting bad results. So I just don't like to do it. But
yeah, maybe you haven't found the right stereo bus compressor for the way you mix.
Boy, oh boy, I've tried.
You've tried it all.
I've tried. I think my favorite thing to do is to just smack shit with soft limiting a little bit, because then I can kiss transients and leave everything else alone, and like I said, like not play with the time domain at all.
Yeah, I totally dig that. That's cool, man. You're really like in touch with timing, like we were talking also about like with like moving like the milliseconds of the kick and the snare, and like just that those very subtle timing things make a massive difference on a record. And
that's it.
And some musicians rush, some musicians drag, and like that sometimes is the sound of the band or whatever. There's so many things.
Exactly. Yeah, the difference between Iggy and the Stooges, or like I don't know, the Sugar Hill Gang band.
It's I heard Billy Corgan is like super on top of his like guitar, like rhythm. Like he'll like purposefully play slightly ahead or slightly behind. It's like very like there are people that are just super into that. It's something worth thinking about. I feel like maybe I've gotten stuck as like a bass player to kind of just try to lock in all like on the one, you know?
Well, there's again another great quote. I